Hi, everybody. Happy Monday night. I'm super excited to be here today and just really excited to share my story. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention that you guys can certainly ask me questions. I'm going to leave time at the end. But if something sparks for you while I'm speaking, feel free to leave a comment and I will certainly grab it. You're not going to throw me off at all. So feel free to jump right in and let me know if you have any questions or things you'd like to mention while I'm presenting. All right. So today I'm going to be talking all about my mental health diagnosis and honestly, my journey pre and post that diagnosis and how I really came into my voice, but also transformed as a leader, both in the workplace and in my professional or in my personal life, pardon me. So first I'll start by telling you a little bit about where I'm at now. My name is Emily. I am actually a UW alum, and I'm currently living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. After college, I worked professionally a few places before moving to California. That's where I started working for the company Yelp, who I'm currently with. And my journey is certainly going to touch on my professional life. It's going to talk a little bit about how I evolved in the workplace and how I really was able to come into myself and become a better leader by being more defined in who I was as a person. And so this image is really taking me back to the place where I had come post diagnosis to feeling more like myself again, to feeling like I was in that confidence space that I had once known. But the crucial thing is so much about my life and what I understood about myself had changed very quickly. So coming into this new version of myself was not a simple process. It was not an easy process, but it definitely created a stronger voice for me and made me a more authoritative voice in a few of the different arenas that I'm working in. So I want to take you back to a mindset that I had when I was first really getting started in the world. I actually was an intern at UW-Madison, the student union. And in that time in my life, I really lived by this belief that you are responsible for your own happiness. I thought that hard work and a full social calendar were going to be the keys to happiness in life. And I really just thought that if I picked and chose things that I enjoyed, everything else would work out. And what a nice way to think of the world. So this was me at that time, back in college at UW. I really did take that full college experience and really immersed myself in Madison. So I was very active with friends. I was very active on campus working. I had a few different jobs around campus. And at this time, my brand or my identity was all about being a great friend, being a great student, really trying to fill my calendar with things that made me happy. And I was pretty good at that time in my life at taking full advantage of opportunities. So in the bottom left there, I'm studying abroad. I did a travel program, and these were times where my energy was high. I was always really vibrant. And at this point in life, social media wasn't what it is now, but I certainly considered myself a storyteller in all of these different times. So you'll notice here, I was really creating a sense of self. The upper right-hand corner, I got into running. So I was doing half marathons, I was doing full marathons, and really in this time trying to figure out who I was. And a lot of that identity for myself was rooted in those friendships I had, was rooted in the school that I went to, the degree that I was going after, and this future of success that I was building for myself. And all of this was in a world where mental health was not on my landscape at all. I certainly thought that, stress and other things were a part of my day to day life, but I didn't really understand or talk about mental health as it related to my day to day. I didn't really have practices in place to keep a nice, healthy balance. I didn't have a lot of good time management skills, but I was very, very happy and I felt very fulfilled. In this center picture here, this is actually the photo that I posted when I was announcing that I was moving to San Francisco. So that was really my I made it moment. I was so proud of myself. I had gotten a job at a big tech company and I was moving across the country. And to me, that was so much of who I was. Being able to show up in front of a room of people and talk to anyone, or go to an event and really bring a crowd of business owners to a point of wanting to engage or try something new that they had never done before. And you can see in all of these images, I was really, really driven by this happiness and this fulfillment. So, in the upper left hand corner, this is my very first picture of myself when I moved to San Francisco, right in front of my new fancy building downtown in the heart of the city financial district. And I was just getting ready to get started. And being at this big company, having this big brand, living in a big city, all of that made me feel very accomplished. But I was fulfilling in many ways a dream to put an image of myself out to the world, and not so much asking myself what these roles or what these steps were really taking me towards. I didn't have a clear North Star, but I knew I just wanted to be really good at my job. I wanted people to think I worked hard all the time, that I was always busy. And that was what made me feel accomplished. At this time in my life as well, I was really trying to grapple with the fact that there was so many possibilities ahead of me, but I really needed to continue to dream big. So I never wanted to hinder myself or put limits on myself when it came to things like what I could accomplish. And I also didn't want the world to think that I had gotten somewhere and then just stalled. So for me, it was all about what the next project was, what the next job title would be, what the next opportunity at work would be. And oftentimes I was achieving or pursuing those things without really thinking about myself or thinking about how I was doing or where I wanted to go. A lot of those things were actually items that I was chasing after in order to feel like I had been accomplished, instead of asking myself what that sense of fulfillment really looked like. Then we came to 2018. So by 2018, I had been at Yelp for 4 years. I was a really established player at work. I was a public speaker. I would travel around the country, and I really loved what I did. But I wanted to figure out a way to be even more remote from my workplace. So I really had this idea of launching big concept projects and putting a lot of things into place that would give me the ability to be a little bit more remote. And the irony now is, as we live in COVID 2020, everyone is kind of living this remote world. But back then, at this point in time, I was finally starting to separate some of my work achievements and my work goals from my personal goals. These images here are showing that very brief week where everything was going to change for me. So on the left-hand side, you see I got a brand new puppy. This was a really exciting time, something I'd been planning for a long time. And I had made all these coordinations with work in order to be able to stay at home and work from home for about a month while I adjusted this new dog to my life. And in the center here, you'll see the very beginning of my brain running away from me, as I like to call it. So again, let's step back 1 second and paint the picture here. I went to Madison. I really had a great time on campus, had a lot of interaction with different departments at the school, different groups, different clubs, and I felt fulfilled in that journey. I moved on and I went after work goals as the way to really establish myself and to feel like I was creating a voice, like I was creating a brand. And my brand was, I work hard and I'm a great quick move, go, always ready to do the next thing. So that was this projection that I was putting into the world. To me, success was being busy. And so you see here in these slides where all those desires, all those goals for myself, all of those ideas of my future really got pushed into one section. So these center sticky notes, while they slightly look organized here, they really are a hodgepodge of me getting to this point in my life where I had been reaching for and going after all of these things that I thought I wanted, but it was really working towards this image that I wanted other people to perceive me as. And none of it had really anything to do with the core parts of who I was as a person. It was all about who I wanted people to see me as. And so, in these few days after I got my puppy, things started to get really out of control. As someone who is extremely type A, has a lot on her plate often, I really do think that I'm a great multitasker and juggler of all things. And at this time in October of 2018, that was when everything in my world came crashing down. So on October 16th, I was taken to a hospital because I was no longer making any sort of sense in my words I was speaking. I was physically not making much sense. I was very incomprehensible. I wasn't hearing what people were saying to me. I also wasn't able to speak back to them. And it was a very scary moment. Anyone who knew me and knew who I was, my accomplishments, they would have looked at me that day and thought that someone else was in my body. It was an out of body experience, and most of it is also completely wiped from my memory because of how intense this experience was. So at the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. But imagine on a Tuesday, you're working, you've got a full week planned, you've got everything on the calendar, and come Wednesday morning, you wake up in a hospital strapped to a bed. That was the situation that I was in. I was then taken from the hospital in an ambulance to an inpatient treatment facility. And in this entire process, I really had no idea what was going on. It was about 24 hours after I had been hospitalized that I was able to sit down with a doctor and be told that I had a bipolar diagnosis. And essentially, what happened in that moment is everything I knew about myself and my life and my future was completely turned on its head. When I heard those words, you have bipolar disorder, all I saw was stigma. What do people in the world perceive as bipolar disorder? What does this mean for me? What parts of my life am I never going to be able to get back to? What parts of my life are going to need to be forever changed? And the main feelings that I was going through that entire time were shame. I was very scared. I was so sorry and I felt so guilty that I had let myself get to this place. And I was really sad about my future. I really did not have much hope or much vision for where I could go. Everything that I knew about my ability to be successful seemed like it was no longer possible. And that was a really, really crazy place to be. Essentially, I was given an official timeout from life. I needed to go into therapy Monday through Friday after I left the inpatient hospital from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So imagine instead of going to work every day, you go to a facility and you sit through multiple types of therapy. And as I was going through this, it was about a 3-month period. Every single day, I was asking myself, am I going to be able to go back to my job? Am I going to be able to keep the friends that I have? Am I going to be able to do all of the things in my life that I had hoped for? And the irony of those 3 months was I had no idea at the time how much sense of self I was gaining, how much understanding of so many of my life experiences I was gathering. And I think that's true for so many of us, whether you have a mental health diagnosis or not. Oftentimes, when you're operating day to day and going through life, you're not necessarily thinking about your sense of self or the identity that you're trying to create. You're more so embodying or taking on roles that you need to play in the world, whether that's a task you need to do for work, something you need to do for a family member of yours. A lot of our sense of self is often determined by other people. Another interesting element to this is that by the time this episode happened to me, I was a pretty established player at work. So there was a reputation that I had. It was certainly a reputation for working hard, for being successful, for executing a lot of external relationships that reflected positively on our company and on our business. But all of that was perceptions of me without the label of bipolar disorder. And so I came to a very pivotal point in my life when I was transitioning from that outpatient treatment into regular day to day life again. Now, these images that I'm going to show you here of post diagnosis really are meant to show that absolute joy, that absolute comfort and confidence in who I was. And that certainly did not happen overnight. But every single day when I was in treatment and in therapy, I was called to ask myself what really mattered, what was the most important thing, and how to actually prioritize things in my life that were going to help me move forward in a positive way. And so much of this progress and so much of this adapting to my new identity was happening through embracing this new me. And once I had gone through my actual diagnosis and treatment, I really needed to restructure and reshape my life. So, some of the things that immediately changed for me were the ways that I operated and functioned every day, some of them being very core tenets in what I thought made me a successful person. So here you'll see three things that I needed to give up, that I couldn't do anymore, and that needed to absolutely change in my life. The first one is this idea of a constant stream of thought. So pre diagnosis, I would have those moments, and I'm sure you guys have all had them, where you're in the shower, for example, and you think of something that you need to do and you need to do it today. And you're so grateful that you remembered that thing. In reality, your brain is oftentimes running a mile a minute. And because so many of us are multitaskers and we're constantly going from one thing to another, to the other, to the other, we are not allowing our brains that sense of completion or the idea of finishing a project or a task before moving on to the next one. So, multitasking was another element of my sense of self that really did feed into my identity. And one good example of that would be in work, in a leadership role where I am the one on the team who is providing that support and guidance to my other colleagues. I am oftentimes doing a million things at once and feeling like that's a positive. Being able to be in a meeting and respond to another message really, I thought, made me look like I had it all figured out, like I was balancing everything. And that brand that I was putting out there was that I'm always available, I'm always here to help, I'm always here to solve problems. The last thing was this idea of early mornings. I really did not sleep much at all pre diagnosis. I used to get about 4 to 5 hours of sleep on an average night. And I would always wake up feeling refreshed, feeling like I didn't need any more sleep. And so, because of that, I would always get this sense of being so accomplished by being awake early morning. And I think a lot of us, we see this in society, right? There's this concept of CEOs always up at 6 and all of these senses of if you are really accomplished or if you're getting a lot done in a day, you've got to be up at the crack of dawn. And these were parts of my identity, parts of my brand that I was projecting out to the world that I absolutely needed to remove from my life post diagnosis. These were things that just were not going to be negotiable. I wasn't going to be able to be multitasking during meetings anymore. I wasn't going to be up at 5 or 6 a.m. every day anymore. And I needed to get a little bit more intentional about how I was able to project that brand out to the world. The other thing that happened was I was able to take on new parts of myself that helped me reaffirm who I was and actually be able to get that confidence back that I had lost in some of these other areas. So, boundaries, balance, and be selfish. These were things that I needed to prioritize post diagnosis in order to be able to move forward in a healthy way. So imagine during these 3 months when I'm every single day going to therapy and treatment, coming home every night and trying to live out some normalcy again. This was a time when I really knew that who I used to be was no longer going to work, but I didn't know what my new brand would be. I wasn't confident that if I made these changes, I could still be successful. If I made these changes, I could still be a great leader. If I made these changes, I could still host large events and travel around the country and speak on behalf of my company. So I was really in this sense of everything that I know to be the things I'm proud of about myself need to go to the wayside. And how do I rebuild some of that brand and sense of self and sense of accomplishment and achievement into my new normals? And really, what I started to do in order to get that sense of self back was tell stories. So even before we get to this slide here of bipolar brought balance, I want to talk about that first year. So after I went through that treatment and therapy and went back into the workplace in January of 2019, it was decided between myself and my staff of medical providers that I was going to return to my regular life and give it a try. For 6 months, we would see if the event lifestyle and the traveling and the public speaking and this reality was capable for me. And I was not confident that it was going to be. But the one thing that I knew for myself to be true was that I would have a much better chance of succeeding if I was open and honest with those around me about what I was going through. And so I made a decision when I got out of the hospital to call my boss. He was actually the first person I called. And I want to just mention that, of course, is because of a relationship that I had, because I had this connection where I felt safe. And I don't necessarily think that everyone needs to be open and honest and tell everyone about their mental health situations, circumstances, whether that's a diagnosis or not. But for me, that was what was going to help me regain confidence, stability, and try to return to that voice that I had always known myself as. And so I started by telling my boss, and then I started by telling the people who reported to me. And the things that I told them were, this is what I've lived through. This is the scary event that I had, but here are the life changes that have come out of it. Here are the positive things that I've seen as a result of this experience. And those positive things came to me in the form of finding out that even when you don't multitask during meetings, you can be just as, if not as successful during the day or as accomplished as you did before. Or other things that I needed to know, like when I tell people who report to me that I don't show up on my computer at 8 a.m. and stay on it nonstop until 5 p.m., but that I need to build some sense of balance in my day, that provides space for them to bring their true, full, and authentic self to the workplace as well. So for me, so much of this evolution and so much of this experience was asking myself if work was my sense of who I was, if being busy really made me feel like I was contributing more to the world or to society. And all of those things were not actually true. So when I took that step back and I prioritized my mental health, I started to notice things like my colleagues would not only respect that, but they would start to be more comfortable with me. And I started to see things like their work improve. And what I mean by that is, we would have better conversations when I was talking to people who reported to me if they knew that they could be open and share something such as, I had a really hard weekend with my significant other, and I'm having a hard time getting into this project, and I need to reignite myself with energy to get this done. When they were able to bring that openness to me, it started becoming so apparent that that relationship was because of the voice and the brand that I was projecting to them. I was telling them a dialogue that I was really just drumming to myself over and over, which was, mental health is important. Being busy doesn't equate my worth. And being true, authentic, real, and bringing everything about myself to a conversation with other people, to a presentation, to an event that I'm planning, actually enriches that experience. So, for that entire year after I returned to work, I was going through the process of bringing people in my life into what had happened. First, started telling friends, right? Then I was telling extended family members. Then I was telling, you know, people who weren't my closest colleagues, maybe people that I had just engaged with on a random whim. And every time that I shared this story, every time that I shared this experience, something really crazy happened. People would be reflecting back to me how much these experiences resonated with things they were going through. And there were two big things that actually played into this positive sense of self. One was this ability to still feel successful, to get that positive reassurance from my colleagues and my friends and those who reported to me that I was doing a good job, even when I was actively doing things that I thought were going to impede my success. So when I stopped multitasking, when I stopped working until 10 p.m., when I started setting healthier boundaries, when I started prioritizing my sleep, those things I really thought were going to make me less successful. But ultimately, they allowed me to step into my true self and allowed me to take my success to a completely new level. Throughout that first whole year there, I was really coming back time and time again to this idea that all my life I've been a storyteller, and all my life I've been someone that loves to just talk about things and, give advice and work through different options of how someone could approach a life circumstance or a relationship or a tough time at work. But I really wasn't an expert in anything, right? I was just a person who loved to gab, a person who had worked a bunch of odd jobs and was just kind of a go-getter with a lot of people in her life who she learned other experiences from. But as I began to live that year post-diagnosis and to live into my new reality, I realized that I was becoming an expert. I was becoming an expert in living with a mental health disorder. I was becoming an expert in understanding what stigma means, in understanding what people's perceptions in the world of what my experience were, and how I could bring my voice, my perspective, my experience to that conversation. So, a year after I was hospitalized on October 16th of 2019, I launched Bipolar Brought Balance. And this is where my voice was able to fully develop. And it's still developing, it's still evolving. But when I launched this site, I did it with a lot of intentionality. So I launched this blog. I had 3 blog posts that were pre-baked in there. These are the first 3 that you're seeing in front of you. They were a combination of telling my story, providing some insights, tips, and tricks I had learned, tools in my tool belt, I call them, for living this life with a mental health disorder. And my key pillars of expertise were work life balance, relationships, and boundaries. And I had become a self spoken expert in those areas by living my truth. So, the first one, work life balance, is something I had always tried to attain. As I was working and growing those years out of college, trying to get my feet under me and really establish myself in my career, I was working all of the time. And I would constantly say, I need to figure out some work life balance, or maybe I need to talk to a therapist about how stressed I am sometimes at work. And ultimately, I would never prioritize those things because something else always seemed more important. And it felt like I could get to my mental health later. That's no longer a reality for me. My mental health is my very top priority, and everything else in life needs to fall in line after that for me. Having that severe diagnosis that I had allowed me to give myself that permission slip to prioritize my mental health. It gives me that freedom to not feel guilty when I cancel a meeting a day in advance because I need that extra time to do whatever it is I need to do. And so, as I was building all of that confidence in how I was going to establish new work life balance practices, I was becoming an expert in how to do that. My life was providing examples and learning opportunities that I could then share with other people. As it relates to my relationships and boundary setting, that's stuff that I continue to evolve as I build out this website, this blog. And so my goal when I launched this was every month to put a long form blog post out. Anything from storytelling to linking to helpful and reliable resources to pointing out other elements of my brand, voice, and identity that have grown and become more successful in this process. I also launched an Instagram account, which is essentially a community where I'm working to foster conversations about mental health as well as slay stigma. And my big goal in slaying stigma is to present a name and a face to a disorder that people don't know much about. And in creating this brand and this sense of self, I've evolved, right? So when I launched this account, it was very much about the positive elements of what I still possessed, all of the things I could still achieve, even though I had this diagnosis, as well as talking about my personal experiences with the diagnosis. But the underlying message of this community is that overall in this country, our conversations around mental health aren't happening enough. And there are too many examples or misinformation about my diagnosis specifically. So I felt it was important for me to share my experiences and my perspective, just to bring another lens into the category of bipolar disorder. And so, as I continue to build this community, my voice is changing. One great example of this would be everything that's happened in the past 5 months. As we've gone through this pandemic, as we've gone through the social unjust and unrest in this country, my voice has had to change. It has had to evolve to address those issues from my perspective. And the same with all of you as you're continuing to build your voices and your brand. Very much of what you're doing to project yourself into the world is controlled by you, right? You can share portions of your story, you can expand on things, or you can keep some things for just you. And that is what you do when you begin to identify your voice. And I think my main lesson and point here is while I went through an intense mental health episode, was then given a very serious mental health diagnosis, and was ultimately called and required to take the time to pause and re engage with who I was as a person, we can all do that as we continue to evolve our voice and our brand. So, to me, the core tendencies to being successful as you're evolving your voice and your brand is really looking introspectively at yourself. Where have you been so far? Where is your identity right now? And what parts of your life or your accomplishments or your relationships are you projecting to the forefront? And why are you projecting that? What is the underlying reason for yourself? What are you hoping to achieve with that tone of voice? And then also maybe asking yourself, what elements of yourself or your experiences are something that make you an expert and you don't even know it? What lived experiences have you had that can help you not only share your story, but maybe help other people see their story in you? The last thing I'll say before I open it up for conversations and chat, and please, I do encourage any questions or any comments. I would love to keep this dialogue going a little bit longer, but I will just say that in this process, as I've continued to evolve my own sense of self, as I've continued to make my voice more distinct, more well known, I have naturally seen my leadership soar. And what I mean by that is, as I've become more comfortable in my sense of self, as I've projected what is important to me with some intention, instead of really just trying to achieve something for someone else's gain, I've been able to build a voice in a way that allows other people to feel open, vulnerable, and real. All of us deal with so many things in our life that to ask someone to show up to work and compartmentalize everything else is just not realistic. Brene Brown talks about this a lot. There are lots of other great leaders that touch on this. But for me, in this growth and sense of self and development of my voice, it really has been reinforced that by being open, by being vulnerable, by bringing my whole self to work, to my relationships, to my external partnerships, I have gotten those rewards tenfold in trust from my partners, in trust from people who report to me. And I've also been given more opportunity to continue to evolve and reinforce who I am as a person. So I'm going to pause there and see if we have anyone who wants to jump in with questions. They can be anything about my mental health, it can be about bipolar disorder, anything that you'd like to talk about, as well as if you want to talk about that sense of self and reinvigorating that. As I'm waiting for more things to come in, questions or chat, I will just plug the Instagram handle and the blog. If you guys are looking for content, anything from work-life balance to relationships to different mental health perspectives and things to consider, even if you don't have a diagnosis, please follow me on Instagram and join that community. It's full of a lot of mental health advocates who I really am inspired by. And it's really been very incredible to see how connections on places like Instagram or Facebook can really create a community and a world where you can come into that sense of self. So if you are out there and you're really trying to figure out what your voice is and who you are as a person, I encourage you to search the internet for different groups or accounts that can maybe help you see what those different tones of voices are sounding like, see what those different authoritative people in the space are talking about, and see where your lived experiences might apply directly there. I'm not seeing any questions come in, but I do hope that it was a wealth of information for you guys. I think the key takeaways here for you are, again, really thinking introspectively about what you're portraying and bringing every day as you project yourself into the world. What is driving that for yourself? What is the driving force behind how you bring yourself, how you show up? And then how can you take control or create an authoritative voice off of your lived experiences? And how can your openness, vulnerability, sense of self create opportunities for you to lead from a place of balance? I think I'll wrap there if we don't have any other questions. I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you had a little bit of inspiration from this experience. And I always say, if you have a brain, you should care about your mental health, whether you have a diagnosis or not. Especially during COVID, we all have been experiencing wild stress, things we never thought we would see in our lifetime, and every day can present its own challenges. So make sure that you're taking time for yourself, make sure that you're prioritizing your mental health, and remember that you can always still create this sense of self from within and continue to evolve it. Oh, we do have some questions. Perfect. Have I ever experienced discrimination at my workplace? Victoria, this is a great question. So, one thing I will say is I'm extremely fortunate that I work at a very open and progressive company. So my company is open to a lot of different backgrounds. We work very hard at having diversity and inclusion in our workplace across, different backgrounds, whether that's religious, ethnic. Um, but mental health is not necessarily something that we often talked about in the workplace. I was told and appropriately coached throughout my entire medical leave that I did not need to share any information internally if I didn't want to. I didn't need to tell them if I had cancer or bipolar disorder. It really did not need to be something that I disclosed. I took that leap of faith and decided to be open. I do think that it was a combination of having a pretty established career at the company, as well as being at this open and progressive company that helped me to be accepted. Now, one thing I will say, and maybe I should have presented on this more in the presentation, but since I have been open and forthcoming about my experience, about the fact that we do have resources to support you if you have an episode and you are on staff, our company has actually started to do some more progressive and proactive mental health communications. So I was on a corporate panel during May for Mental Health Awareness Month, where 3 of us shared our experiences with mental health and how that played into the workplace. I'll be honest, I have been championed from that point forward. I have a lot of people that reach out to me and tell me that they are going through something but never shared it internally at work. And they've now taken the steps to begin to do that. That makes me feel incredible. And I'm continuing to work with our company to get more mental health resources. We've been very fortunate to get some free counseling sessions through work and other resources that have allowed the company to openly and progressively talk about mental health. So again, I'm very fortunate, but I will say that is a big reason that I advocate. That's a big reason that I share my story, because I understand that not everyone is in that position. And actually, most people aren't. Most people really do have to worry or consider the stigma that they might have in the workplace. And what I would say, if you are dealing with that, is 2 things. One, you really need to prioritize yourself first. So if that starts to feel like it's getting into a very unhealthy situation, I would really consider going to an HR partner or someone like that so that you can reestablish some stability. But I think the other thing is, it really is about more of us who are living these experiences talking about what the reality of the disorders looks like, because I can still be a successful employee. I can still be an accomplished leader, presenter, event producer, but they might not think that if they have a preconceived notion of my condition. So I'm inspired by other people in the community who speak openly. This sweatshirt that I'm wearing, Slay Stigma, is created by one of my favorite mental health advocates. And she's actually one of the first people who wrote about the potential backlash of being open about your mental health in the workplace. So that was definitely something that I had to consider. I'm fortunate for my circumstances, and that's another huge driving factor in why I feel so strongly about sharing my story, because I know not everyone is in that situation, but I do hope as we continue to share more stories and shed more light on what the reality of these disorders looks like, more people will feel comfortable coming forward and sharing that experience. Let's see if I missed anything else here. Camille has a little affirmation that she loves ownership of work-life balance as a skill. And I have to say, I used to consider myself such a successful hard worker because I'd be up late at night and I'd be on my inbox all times of the day. But now pretty much signing off around 5:30 and turning that computer down until the next morning. I live in a world where I can acknowledge that nothing about my job is too much of an emergency that it needs to be handled at 10 p.m. And that's not true for everyone, but if that sounds like it's true for you, but maybe not something you're living out yet, I encourage you to challenge it. Try to turn that computer off every day at 5:30 or 6 and not turn it on till the next day, and see how many really important things you miss in the evening. I don't think you'll miss too many. I'll give another minute here to see if anyone else flutters in with questions or comments. But again, really enjoyed the opportunity to share this experience with you guys. I would love for anyone to join my Instagram community, start following me there, subscribe to my blog, or just connect with me if you have questions or you want to talk personally one-to-one, or you want to hear more about a specific area that I didn't delve in deeper to. You can message me here or you can send me an email. My email is emily@bipolarbalance.com. So just what you're seeing in front of you, toss an Emily right in front of it. And again, thank you guys so much. Remember that who you are is very valuable. It has so much power in the world as long as you can lean into it, be proud of it, and take the best parts forward. Thank you guys so much. This was a great time.